Anthony, I feel like I haven't seen
We
you.
all had these really serious looks on our faces for some reason. Like
I
it's
was
like
just
it's like we're here with some Breaking Bad news. Like, hi everybody. Hello everybody.
Welcome. I'm just going to go ahead and apologize in advance and just say Anthony and I are feeling a little punchy today, and it's like a Monday, feeling a little sassy.
Yeah. It's your professionalism that I respect.
There we go. Now we're off to the races.
Exactly right. All right. Welcome to 5 Questions. It's a little bit of a different approach that we take here on How to Founder, as opposed to going deep dive into a topic. We go deep dive with another founder. We ask them about their journey. And to start off with, I don't even do introductions. I'm a lazy host. Welcome, Danny. Tell us about you. Tell us about yourself. What brings you here other than a huge mistake? You agreed to come on this podcast.
Real estate seminar? Isn't this the real estate seminar? I'm on the
we got AMA products to sell. Let's go.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Anthony and Chris, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. I love your energy. I love the attitude. We need a lot more of you in the world.
I don't say that our wives would say that's
exactly right. Exactly right. I'm going to have my wife listen just to the opening of this podcast.
There you go. That's how I do it. Yeah. I was watching a horrible show last week called The News, and it totally put me in a bad mood. So this puts me in a good mood. So thank you so much for that. My name, I am Dr. Danny Brassell. My last name's really easy to remember how to spell. It's spelled like Brassell. No, I never took any grief over that in school.
Right. I want to get into like the trauma that we all had for our last names, like because I was all the hot dog stuff, like Franks and Beans and Franks and stuff.
I was Tony Baloney the whole freaking high school. Yeah,
we could do a whole. I used to do that. Actually, that was the way I used to haze the new pledges when I was a fraternity brothers. They had to come up with a list of 100 names, like building, gymnasium. Things like that. So
that's also the nerdiest hazing I've ever heard of.
Well, so when you come from a small town, you're kind of short. That's how you entertain yourself.
So Brassell, we got to that, and you have a Ph.D. in the end, which means that you went to school for a long time.
Well, but don't be too impressed. When I got an acceptance letter from the University of Southern California, it said, "Congratulations, Danny, you've been accepted into our Doctor of Philosophy program in education." And I looked at it and like, oh, that's what Ph.D. stands for. I'm not too sure. So I guess if you want my background, my entire life is just defined by pivots because I can't hold steady employment. Over 30 years ago, I started off as a journalist. I was working on the President Bush Sr. 1992 campaign. It was the greatest job in the world. I got to work with all of the major newspaper editors in the country, and one major daily offered me a great job doing the city beat for $16,500 a year. And then a friend told me, "Hey, Danny, they're hiring inner city teachers in South Central Los Angeles for $25,000 a year." So I can confess that I became an educator for the noblest
of money,
for the high pay. You got it.
You're the only person ever. You're the only person ever decided to be a teacher for the money.
I was grossly misinformed.
I was not.
And I worked in Compton in South Central LA. I loved it, and then I became a professor. Started doing that, and then in 2005, my wife and I attended a real estate seminar, which turned out to be a scam, and we lost everything, and I could focus on all the negatives, but I'm a positive person. First of all, my wife is my life mate. I put her through the ringer, and she stuck by me. Second of all, I never put all of my value in money anymore because I learned you can lose it just like that. Third, I try not to judge other people, because if I was somebody who looked at what I did, I would have said, you deserve that. But now I realize if you don't know everything about a person, you really don't know anything about a person. Fourth, I became a Christian, which I'm always embarrassed to say, but the more I read the Bible, I'm not the first screw up to find Jesus. And fifth, I didn't want to file for bankruptcy, which I eventually had to do because of a state known as North Cuba, also known as Florida. There's no law in that state. But
North Cuba, that's good.
yeah, I'm not bitter or anything. But in order to avoid bankruptcy, my accountant said, well, you have to make this much more money this year. And so I started speaking on the side, and I hit the number right on the number. Well, the next year, he gave me a much higher number, and I hit that number right on the number. So in year 3, I thought, well, maybe I should set a higher number. And during one of the worst economic downturns in American history, I was able to build up a speaking business, which was doing great until 2020 when COVID hit and people asked me, how's your speaking business? I'm like, oh, it's great. How I lost 200 speaking engagements last night because the entire world shut down. Just doing great. So my next pivot was for years, people had asked me to coach them how to speak. And I always resisted because you need to know this about me, Chris and Anthony. I'm a very tough teacher. I have very high standards for my students. I really want you to succeed and I hold you accountable. But it's turned out to be wonderful because I work with a lot of entrepreneurs and business leaders, and they're motivated and they do the work. And so that's my very long answer to your short question.
How many grown men have you made cry? Grown men or grown women made cry because you told them they're terrible speakers? Or just,
Oh, I don't make people cry. I make them laugh.
I mean, you're making Anthony cry right now. Just look at it.
I'm waiting to be scolded.
I don't scold. That was the biggest mistake. When I taught elementary school, people just assumed I was the only guy on campus, and so they just assumed I was the disciplinarian. Big mistake, because my kids, it's just like actually the stupidest thing I've ever said in my life was my first day teaching kindergarten. I told the kids, line up. They went all over the place. By the end of my first week teaching, I sounded like a cop listing Miranda rights, going, everybody get behind your chairs with your hands behind your. I mean, you have to be very specific.
You have the right to remain silent, and this kid has a sucker in his mouth going,
I love it. And it's great because I have all that energy too. Actually, I mean, I've taught every age level from preschoolers to rocket scientists, but my secret passion is with the little ones. I love it because they don't know what they can't do yet, and they do amazing things and they say amazing things every single day.
I love it. All right, so we're going to go through a series of 5 questions. Answer the question. We might have follow-ups. We might, take it slightly left or slightly right, or Anthony will usually take it down. So just underneath. But we'll ask some follow-up questions. But
there may or may not be a pull my finger reference in this.
Oh dear. We're going to get that one.
We have not had a good fart joke in a while.
Right. It's good. We can do my Blazing Saddles references.
That's true. No joke. I watched that probably a week and a half ago, and I laughed so hard I cried. It's one of the funniest movies of all time.
Just a great. It's actually when I'm teaching. I was just teaching a guy the other day. He wanted some humor in his presentation. I'm like, one of the best things for humor is what's called the dramatic pause. My favorite example is in Blazing Saddles. Gene Wilder's the prisoner and Cleavon Little's the sheriff. And Cleavon Little looks at Gene Wilder. He's like, I am your host and you are my guest. So what do you like to do? And Gene Wilder says, play chess, make love. Well, let's play chess. It's one of my favorite dramatic pauses ever.
Chris, I have to tell the story. I've got a dramatic pause story that's the best. Nobody's going to top this story.
Okay, let's hear it.
This is NS. This is not safe for work. So just you have kids in the car, earmuffs. So I've had enough kids. So I decided to not have any more kids and go through that procedure.
Oh.
And so I'm with urologist sitting there. It's a very comfortable procedure. That's a lie. And he's doing his thing, and he's a talker. Like, he's talking about fishing trips and I'm like, I have my life in his hands, almost literally, in a painful procedure. And he's just telling me stories. And then, so he wraps up number 1 on to number 2. And he says, I'm going to do something I've never done before and take my wife to California. And I'm like, dude, you can't pause. You can't start a sentence. Let me just say it's not comfortable when your doctor's laughing and giving you that either. But sorry, I didn't mean to divert the conversation. I just thought I had to tell that story.
I mean, I think that we're all a little better off having just heard about your vasectomy, Anthony. Thank you.
Sorry, this wasn't about me, but I had to get that story off my chest. I apologize.
Thank you for telling that. This is your therapy session. We'll be sending you a bill. All right. On to the actual content now that we've spent 11 minutes bullshitting this other stuff. And, really getting visuals in my head. I know. Washing my eyes out is going to just never get.
I feel better if that helps.
Danny, what is one unexpected belief that you hold dear as a founder that most people find completely strange and counterintuitive? So one thing you think that if you told somebody, they're like, what? But it's something you really genuinely hold on to as a founder.
Well, so I co-founded the Well-Crafted Story Workshop with Coach Jimmy Hayes Nelson. I always call us the professor and the poet because I have an education background. He has a Broadway background. And probably one of the things that is most counterintuitive that we train all of our clients with is give away your best stuff. It sounds very counterintuitive, but people always say to me, they're like, well, if I give away my best stuff, why would somebody work with me? And my response is, if you don't give away your best stuff, why would somebody work with you? You need to, and actually there's really, forgive me, I'm always research based and I always like to look at examples, but the people that proved this concept were, I think it was back in the 90s, Monty Python, people were pirating their videos like crazy. And it drove them so crazy, they just decided to put all of their videos available for free on YouTube. That year, they sold more DVDs than anybody else in the history of DVD sales because they gave everything away for free. They built up the interest. So I always encourage people, give away your. Plus, I work with Jimmy because we have a thing called integrity. I see a lot of these people out there; they're just trying to cash checks.
How do you spell that? How do you
integrity?
Well, I've never, because a lot. I'm not going to name names, but there's a lot of people. They talk about fulfillment, and they take the check, but then they don't teach anybody anything. And I'm like, well, what's fulfilling about just cashing the check? To me, the fulfillment is when the person succeeds. I mean, this may be just the teacher in me. I always get excited when I see, I had a guy, my favorite example is a guy named Gustavo. Jimmy and I worked with him 2 years ago, and Gustavo should be president of the United States. He came to America 30 years ago from Ecuador, didn't speak a word of English, did every menial job on the planet. Saved every dime, invested in real estate. 30 years later, the guy's worth like 30 or 40 million dollars, very successful. And so we were putting together his pitch. So his pitch is he has a 4-month real estate program for $40,000. Anthony, Chris, I put together a lot of pitches. That's a pretty high ask for an audience, but I want to encourage him. I said, hey, I've always told everybody there's 2 ways you get better at speaking. First of all, you need to watch lots of speakers. And second of all, one of my mentors was a guy named Jim Rohn. And Jim used to say, you can't pay other people to do your push-ups. Translation, you got to do the work. And so I always tell my clients, you got to go. Even the smallest towns in America have a Lions Club, an Optimist Club, a Rotary Club, a Kiwanis Club. They got schools, they got synagogues, they got chambers of commerce. Go speak everywhere. And Gustavo mentioned to me that he was going to be on a podcast that night. I'm like, okay, Gustavo, here's my phone number. You call me up tomorrow. You got to tell me how it went. He calls me up the next day. He's so excited. He's like, Danny, you're a genius. I'm like, did you go on the podcast, Gustavo? He's like, yes. I'm like, did you make the offer? He's like, yes. I'm like, did you sell any? He's like, 23. Chris, Anthony, reading is my specialty, not math. But if I'm doing my math correctly, he made $920,000 that night on a pitch that we had put together that afternoon. Since then, he and I are still in touch. He's made 8 figures off of this speech. And that's what's fulfilling to me. I mean, I use him as an example because I'm like, I love it. He actually went out and did it. Most people never do anything. I can't stand, most people just yap. They talk and they never do anything. It was kind of like your podcast. How many of your friends have said, "Oh, I want to do a podcast"? I never did anything. You guys did a podcast. Good for you. Most people.
So this is not the problem, Danny. Is it actually?
Is that what we're doing? That's
you're
what we're
saying,
calling
like,
it.
Giving away something, giving away your best stuff, but then there's charging for something else. What is that?
Yeah, our problem is we're expecting to monetize a podcast. I think we're screwed.
Because we're giving it away.
When does the money part happen?
When does the money thing come into play? I didn't know there was another side.
Yeah, inch by inch, it's a cinch. Yard by yard, it may be hard. So I mean, you'll get there. It takes a while. I mean, I worked. Well, okay, I'll give you a better example. So I worked with a guy, Jason, 3 years ago, and Jason, I told him exactly what I told Gustavo. Jason was a real pain. He's, I don't know anybody. I can't get anywhere. I'm like, do you have a Facebook account? He's like, yes. I'm like, go on Facebook Live. As a matter of fact, we're doing it right now. You get on Facebook Live, I'm going to watch you. So he reluctantly gets on Facebook Live, and some woman from Ontario, Canada, accidentally watched him. And guess what? He sucked. And we trained him to, you're doing the same speech.
Now they're married.
Yeah.
No,
so the next day, had him do it again. He had like 3 people go on, and he sucked, but he didn't suck as bad as he did the first time. He has gone online live on Facebook Live every single day for the last 3 years. And now he has 6,000 people in his tribe. And last year he made almost 7 figures off of that tribe. You know, because Russell Brunson has a great expression. I love what he said. He said, it's never been tougher in American industry to get the first dollar out of people's pockets. And it's never been easier to get the second dollar out of their pockets. And what he's saying is you got to build that trust. And that's what your podcast is doing, is you're establishing that trust factor. Is, you know what? I like hanging out with Chris and Anthony. They make me laugh. They're good guys. You know, these are people I can do business with. You don't want to be around. There's so many squirmy. I mean, I love watching. I'm so addicted to watching speakers. I used to go to infomercials. There was this one guy. He was great. He was total sleazeball. He had his hair greased up like Pat Riley. He said, there are 2 types of people in this world. Good, hardworking people and rich people. I'm like, ugh, I gotta take a shower after this.
Actually, Danny, we are the only people to start with a bigger audience than we've had after 65 episodes.
It was probably my story. Yeah, I'm really regretting telling that story now.
Right. I mean, once Anthony gets in the vasectomy zone,
hey, you never know. We might be like Spinal Tap. We might be huge in Japan right now. You never know.
Oh, it's a great point. So give away your best stuff and provide value up front. I think that is good. I think that one of the things that you mentioned, I just want to do a brief follow-up question. And just try to steer it away from vasectomies just in general, is there is a large, I'm going to call it imposter syndrome about whether or not you have something to say, whether or not you can be the person who goes live on LinkedIn or live on Facebook or any of those things. And the reality is that I kind of believe that everybody has something to say and something to teach and something that you can bring to the table. Is that your approach? And how do you deal with that with people that you work with?
Of course, people always freak out. They're telling Jimmy and me like, oh, you know, other people do what I do. I'm like, well, McDonald's has competition. Not everybody wants a McDonald's cheeseburger. Some people want a Burger King. Some want Wendy's. I'm like, other people do what you guys do, but they don't do it like you. You're the only 2 that do it the way you do it. And that's what you got to embrace all the time. And if you focus on, hey, that's why I'm a big believer in starting off with a small niche, and then you can expand from there. But you want to establish your tribe. This is what we're all about. And good riddance when you have people that don't want to work with you. Those are the best. Get rid of them. I mean, when people come to Jimmy and me, they're like, well, how much do you cost? And we're like, we're expensive. We're probably the most expensive people. I don't even know if you can afford us. And what we're doing is, but now they want to know how much we're worth, and what it's a different type of approach. I'm not going to sit there and give them like some Walmart price. If you give Walmart prices, you get Walmart customers. I've got 2 friends that are waiters. One is a waiter at Morton's. The other one is a waiter at Applebee's. The guy that works at Morton's, he averages about $150 in tips per table. The guy that works at Applebee's averages $8 in tips per table, and he has customers that are like, yeah, I want a steak, but can I get half of it medium rare and the other half well done? I mean, it's a pain in the butt. You don't want to deal with that person. So, like,
I'm realizing my mistake now, Danny. I asked my urologist for a discount, and he agreed.
there you go. Did you ask for half off?
Well done. Well played.
That was, man, he set you up, but you knocked it out of the park.
Now I've lowered the level.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's see where we can go. We've only got one question down, so apparently. I think it's a really interesting point. All right, I want to talk about culture. I want to talk about culture, and I particularly want to tie this back to your time as an educator, because culture in schools were so critically important. And so the question that we ask is, if the ideal company culture was sitting at a bar, what would that person be drinking? What would they be, et cetera? But we can't really do that for culture in a school. I just want to get your reflection on what are the key elements in your experience about building a great culture, and can you describe it in some sort of a way, like a person sitting at a bar, or a movie or a TV show or something like that?
Well, I that's a good question, Chris. I mean, I take my job seriously, but I don't take myself seriously, because I ain't all that, and neither are you. And if you think you're all that, teach kindergarten for 1 week. Those little ones will set you straight. I mean,
wait, I'm not.
Yeah. I once had a little girl, LaShonda, she raises her hand. I'm like, LaShonda, questions like, Miss Brassell, when are you going to trim your nose hair? I'm like, I ain't all that. And so it's when Jimmy and I started our company, there's a lot of speaker coaches. I don't know if I call myself a speaker coach, because most of the people we've worked with some speakers, some famous people, but most of the people we work with are entrepreneurs and business people that want to expand their clientele. They want to expand their reach. And, a lot of people, they teach you, we want you to put everybody in the room together and experience your pain when you were becoming an entrepreneur. And there's 3 reasons why life's too short, man. I want people laughing. There's 3 reasons why I don't go with the sad approach. First of all, the world just survived a global pandemic. Everybody's been through a lot of nonsense. I don't think we need to hear another sad story. I think we need some stories of hope. Second of all, what Jimmy and I are teaching people to do is to create what we call a well-crafted story. When I was a reporter, President Bush would have called it his stump speech. This is a speech that you deliver like 20 times a day. This is how you introduce yourself to new audiences. Well, do you really want to give the same sad story again and again? I mean, we have a friend, his daughter died in a school shooting. He's told that story to over 1,000 audiences. I mean, you got to be a lot stronger than me to talk about the worst day of your life. But third, this is where people get angry with me. I have one objective when I'm on stage. I want you to leave feeling better than when you came in. I want you laughing. I want you smiling. I want you happy. I think there's something admirable about that as my objective. I believe that the people that tell those sad stories again and again, by the 20th time they're telling that story, those are now crocodile tears, and now they're being manipulative. And I'm not saying it's not an effective sales strategy. It's actually a very effective sales strategy. But again, I don't want to have to take a shower when I get off stage because I just manipulated my audience. I want people, really one of the psychologists that I love is Robert Cialdini. His 2 books, Influence and Persuasion, are like Bibles to me. But what I love about what Cialdini's talking about is you don't do anything in sales if it's not win-win. If it's not a win-win, you don't do it. And I love that. That's ethics. Ethics and integrity. They're in short supply nowadays, but those things still matter to me.
I like it. So what I'm taking is that the culture that you want to embrace, and this is the culture that you embrace in schools and that you help people sort of work and develop on their own, is a sense first of levity, of not taking yourself seriously. And I think that there is something kind of interesting behind that, of the psychology of just being a human being and allowing other people to connect with you in a true human moment. And then also then to try to make people feel better, try to have some sort of an inspirational message. Did I get it right?
Absolutely. I mean, I used to tell my little ones, sometimes you need somebody else to believe in yourself before sometimes you need somebody else to believe in you before you believe in yourself. I mean, I believe in all of you. They only give me the best and the brightest. And let's go out, make this world a better place. I mean, you tell that enough. I mean, I was blessed. My parents were like that. They were very positive with me. But I believe if you tell a person they're worth something again and again, they start believing it. I also believe if you tell a person they're worthless again and again, they start to believe that. So, it takes the same amount of energy. Why don't you be Ben Kenobi instead of Darth Vader? Be the light, not the darkness.
I like it. Okay. Question number 3, this is one of my favorites. So you've already kind of said this word. So imagine your core leadership talent as a superhero. Which superhero or super ability would you have and why?
Oh, jeez. I don't know, because you said superhero, so I'm like, I want to be invisible.
Why invisible? That's
There is like an invisibility. As a coach, I've always kind of liked it that the coaches for the Olympians don't get the medal. Their reward is they helped coach the Olympian, and that's where I get my reward all the time, is watching people. I work with a lot of people with stage fright, and I get them over that. I was working with an Indian engineer from Silicon Valley, and he was like worried because he, very introverted gentleman. And he's like, Danny, please, you need to make me funny. People don't understand anything. And so he had a very difficult name to pronounce. I'm not going to give his real name. It's something like Shanukar Manaharaji or whatever. So we start his speech now. This is the dramatic pause. So now he says, hello, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Shanukar Manaharaji. Gee, I sure hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And it gets people laugh so comfortable. I'm not trying to make him a stand-up comedian. I'm just trying to, what you were just saying, Chris, is how can we just be human in the moment? And that's what I love working with people, is they think speaking is something that only certain people, everybody can speak. It's a totally teachable skill. I mean, when I was teaching in India to a school and got all the kids all pumped up, and this little boy comes up to me afterwards, has tears in his eyes. He's 6 years old. He's missing his left arm. And he says, how can I succeed? So I crouch down, I get to his eye level. I'm like, when I was your age, I went to 18 different schools before I was 12 years old. Everybody called me stupid because I couldn't talk right. And eventually I went to a school, and a teacher, she worked one-on-one with me, and she would sing things to me. And I found I could sing them back without my stutter, kind of like the movie The King's Speech. And eventually I lost my stutter and I became a swan. But I looked at that boy in the eye and said, isn't it interesting that the little boy everybody made fun of because he couldn't talk right gets paid ridiculous sums of money to travel the world to do what? And he gets the biggest grin on his face. He's like, speak. I'm like, don't let anybody ever tell you what you can't do. So I guess my superpower is getting people to believe in themselves, getting people to accomplish things they didn't think they could on their own.
I think that's fairly profound. And I think you got to it at the end there, which is, there's a theory, and it's kind of a joking theory that I have, but I call it being dealt the joker, which is, I believe that everybody's dealt a hand of cards. They all add up to the same number, but there's a group of people that have the joker in their hand. And the people that have the joker in their hand, it changes the way that you have to play your hand, which means that you need to be of service. You're only genuinely happy when you're being of service. Does that resonate with you or no?
Absolutely. Well, I've never liked the term servant leadership. I'm like, that's just redundant. Leadership by definition is service. A good leader is always serving. And something you had said earlier, I was thinking that, everybody has their own voice, but nobody's saying anything new. I mean, I was walking through the airport the other day, and they had this huge quote from Abraham Lincoln, said, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." I'm like, It's also in the Bible in Mark 3:25, but you can say Lincoln came up with it. But
yeah, exactly. Well, pretty much the same thing.
Yeah. So there's nothing new under the sun. Everybody has their own little packaging or whatever. But it's it's when people. I fell into a political conversation the other day, and people were freaking out one way or the other, and I'm like, my gosh, have you looked at like different periods in time? I mean, we had the Civil War when Lincoln was, that probably wasn't a very good time. I mean, there was the Vietnam War, there was all kinds of riots and stuff. I mean, things happen, like, deal with it.
My favorite saying about the level of contentiousness in Congress is that nobody recently has gotten into a fist fight on the floor, which happened regularly in the early days of Congress. So it's pretty good. What's one piece of common wisdom, quote unquote, in entrepreneurship, founders, early stage companies that you believe is completely overrated and why?
Common. Why? Like when you were going with there, I thought I was just going to say common sense and common practice. I mean, it's the basics that help you succeed. I think a lot of these people that say you got to work smarter, not harder. I'm like, well, yeah, you have to work smarter, but let's face it, you also have to work hard. It takes a lot of hard work to succeed. I mean, you're seeing that with this podcast. I mean, it doesn't happen overnight. It's not like you're this. You didn't just come out with the. I mean, Simon Sinek, who I love, Simon Sinek, nobody knew who he was, and then all of a sudden, Apple did a commercial with him, and now the guy commands $100,000 a speech. But it was nice that Apple did a commercial on him. I mean,
actually,
I could see it. I know what you're going to say, Chris. I could see it in your eyes when Danny said $100,000. You missed the opportunity to put the pinky to your lip.
No,
yeah, you did. You missed it.
No,
I knew what you were going to say before you were going to say it.
I was going down the joke of actually Anthony told me we would be successful overnight, like our first podcast.
It's the only way I got him to agree to go into a podcast with me.
Yeah. It's pretty terrific.
It takes time. Good things take time.
I think there's a couple things just to unpack there, but one of the pieces of wisdom that you just said was the notion of compounding. And it is something that founders, we often just ignore. We ignore this idea that getting a little bit better and a little bit smarter and a little bit a better understanding of the problem or the market or the customers you're serving, et cetera, can have incredible long-term results. And so the work that you do, I mean, are you looking for a sudden transformation? Or are you looking for that slow compounding over time?
Yeah, it takes a while. I mean, there's a great book. I can't remember the British author. He wrote it in 1910 because society had just gone to a 40-hour work week. And so people for the first time had free time. And so it's a great title for the book. It's How to Live on 24 Hours. And basically, most people waste their time. They don't do anything. I've got a friend and he can tell me exactly what's happened on every TV show this week. And he asked me if I'm like, I don't watch shows. Actually, another guy was giving me a hard time because I always I call them shelfies, photos of me reading. And the other day I just said, I get through a book every single week during football because during the commercial breaks and the timeouts and stuff, I can get through an entire book. And he didn't believe me. I'm like, there's so much downtime. Like I use the time a little bit more wisely. A friend of mine's a time management expert, and I always give him a hard time. I'm like, there's no such thing as time management. There's a priority management. I mean, Harvard did a study. They found out 100 years ago, people only had 24 hours in their days. Well, so how are you using that time?
It's funny. Anthony doesn't watch multiple TV shows. He just watches Seinfeld.
That's a good one.
Just over and over and over again. Arnold Bennett is the author. How to Live on 24 Hours a Day. Arnold Bennett. Great
stuff. Love that.
Anthony, how many times have you watched Seinfeld from beginning to end?
I put it on. I have no idea because it's the thing I put on when I fall asleep. So it switches, does something. My brain tunes me out to life and helps me fall asleep. So I've probably watched it a solid 50 times all the way through.
Danny, do you believe in subliminal imprinting for people that are asleep and just hearing Seinfeld references?
You're starting to see that Anthony's turning into Kramer and George.
That's exactly the point.
We should change that superhero joke to what Seinfeld character are you?
I mean, yeah. We don't want to be Kramer, but we're probably all a little bit more like George. So, yeah, that's probably true.
There's some great entrepreneurial advice from Kramer.
Kramerica Industries, still one of the greatest startups.
Kramerica Industries.
Well, actually, that show, he did something, and him and Newman once, because when I lived in Iowa, it was a nickel a can, and I always saw that it was 10 cents a can deposit, and that was going to be my scheme. Is I'm like, I'm going to take these all to Michigan, I'll make twice as much money. It was actually
right. I think it's right. If you had $1,000 right now, you have no social following, and you need to start a company. So You're starting it from scratch with nothing, but you have $1,000. It's only $1,000, the only amount you can spend on it. What company are you starting and why?
What company am I starting?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's a really great question. Well, I mean, I know a lot about speaking, so I mean, I guess this would be the lesson to everybody: is you start what you know. I mean, I don't know enough about healthcare to start a fitness company, so it would probably be exactly what I'm doing right now. Actually, it's kind of what I did do. Yeah, I started speaking. I'd probably try and get on stages immediately. I mean, that's kind of what I did when COVID happened. Is I decided I'm going to get on 20 podcasts a week so I can stay fresh. This is why I love doing podcasts. I'm working with a guy right now, and I got him on a podcast that has 3 people paying attention. And he's like, "Why am I doing this?" I'm like, "It's for you. You're getting in some reps." And plus, so here's an important story there. When I first started speaking, I had 2 bureaus representing me. I get paid $700 a day to speak for the whole day. And my local library, they asked me if I would do a free presentation. They're going to get 500 people there. I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds great." So I go there. 4 people showed up. 2 were my realtors. The other 2 was a Hispanic couple, didn't speak a word of English. But I believe in giving 110%. So I did as much in Spanish as I could. We all laughed, had a good time. Here's the lesson. The Hispanic woman was taking English classes at the Adult Literacy Center. She recommended me to do a 45-minute keynote, which I got paid $4,000 for, 6 times my rate. It taught me it doesn't matter how many are. So this is some encouragement for you with your podcast. It doesn't matter how many people are watching. All that matters is who is watching. If it's the right person, and I had a coach, and she used to always tell me, she's like, "You have no idea the resources at your disposal." I mean, because of her, when I'm at a stoplight now, I realize there's about $1 million worth of cars surrounding me, and you have no idea the resources. So those people are just starting with $1,000. Heck, I don't know if I had $1,000 when I started. I probably had $100. I did a lot of free speeches, but I made a lot of contacts, gave it away for free. And this person recommended me, and this person recommended me. And then because of all that speaking background, then I guess it gives you legitimacy to coach other people. That's what I would do. I would definitely, and that would be the lesson for everybody listening, is you need to teach what you know, do what you know. Don't try and, just because AI is the hot thing. If you don't know anything about AI, I wouldn't be coaching AI.
Anthony, that podcast they're talking about, I had 3 whole people. It's pretty good.
Yeah, there was a backhanded compliment there. Don't worry about if nobody's listening to your podcast, guys.
It's okay.
It's practice.
It's fine. Don't be sad. It's all right. Just because your podcast is terrible, it's okay.
It's okay.
We start somewhere. I had done stand-up comedy for a while, and the reason I started doing it because I was sick of waiting until 2 a.m. to go on stage and to perform just in front of 3 drunks. But there was something to that. And actually, people say, "Oh, stand-up comedy must have been hard." I'm like, "No, it's not. Those people are drunk and they want to laugh." Teaching inner city middle schoolers, that's hard. Those kids are tough. And if you can win them over, that's what taught me. I'm like, "Oh, I'm kind of good at this." I was in a mastermind, and there was a successful salesman in my mastermind, and he asked me to train his sales force. I'm like, "I have no experience training sales." He's like, "Danny, you got middle school teenage boys to read Shakespeare. I'm pretty sure you can motivate my staff." I'm thinking, "Oh, I guess you're right about that."
That's a big accomplishment right there. You can that's pretty impressive. All right, we're going to do a little bit of a speed round, but I'm going to change it up a little bit just based on your background and some of the things that you do. So, is a speech that I'm giving, is it more important to make somebody feel the way I want them to feel, or give them information that I think is going to be important?
All about feeling.
Should I be more data-driven or gut-feeling person as a founder?
Gut feeling person.
Move fast and break things, or should I be very methodical and consistent?
Well, I don't know should, but I like to move fast and break things, get things done.
And long-term vision about where you're headed, or really just focus on the short term and what I need to accomplish this week?
Well, this one will sound weird, but you need a long-term vision. The day-to-day is different than the long-term vision. You need to be going somewhere. I actually was just coaching a guy earlier today, and I asked him what his number was. Most people don't know their number because he's all about money. And I said, well, what's your number? What do you need? And that's because it's one of my favorite stories. Andrew Carnegie, who at the time was the richest man ever to walk the face of the earth, they asked him, how much is enough? And his response was great. He's like, just a little bit more.
Yeah. My number is 867-5309.
There we go. Jenny.
Yes, very good. That's way to pick up the reference. Just before we wrap up, what are some practical advice? Because you really deal with the ability for founders to communicate. You deal with their ability to stand up in front of a room full of people and deliver a clear and concise message and make them feel inspired in the direction that you're heading. Just give me some broad stroke advice for other founders out in the world. What can I do to start investing in that? Besides hiring you, which is the next question, but what are some things I can start doing today?
Well, that's what I was going to say, is that founders, successful people, they know the importance of coaches. I mean, look at Tiger Woods, greatest golfer ever. He had a putting coach. He has a driving coach. He has a mental coach. He should have hired a relationship coach, but he understood the importance of having coaches in his life. I don't know enough about AI, so I hired a coach to teach me AI. He's doing a great job of that. Actually, I'll give you a better story. A couple of weeks ago, my wife asked me to fix the toilet, and I called the plumber. And she was furious. She's like, I told you to fix the toilet. I'm like, I did. I called the plumber. He knows what he's doing. He's going to save me a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of headache. I hired an expert. She's like, he's making way too much money. I'm like, I make too much money because I'm good at what I do. Like when he needs a speech, he's going to hire me. But I don't know how to fix the toilet.
It's a really good point, and I want to bring it back to Anthony's vasectomy, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to let that whole
There's a plumbing reference in there somewhere.
Right. So other than hiring a coach, are there books, do you like podcasts, anything that you would recommend to that I would invest in just to get better at this skill?
Well, I mean, I already told you Robert Cialdini, both of his books, Influence and Persuasion, are just essential for, psychology of the sale. I just think it's phenomenal, and it's ethics based. When I read Jack Canfield's book, The Success Principles, now Jack's mostly known for Chicken Soup for the Soul, but he's got a great book called The Success Principles. And after I read that book, I was talking to my coach at the time. I said, my gosh, he's put a $25,000 coaching program into a $20 book. The stories are amazing. The teaching points are right on. I would have paid $20 just for the bibliography. I'm like, I'm going to make sure this is my priority this year. I'm going to meet Jack. And he said, well, he's speaking at an event and that he was having. And I actually had already scheduled an event, and I canceled my event just so I could meet Jack. And Jack is really one of the best. And now unfortunately, he's retiring, but he's one of the kindest, and he gives away all of his stuff. And the thing I learned from Jack is Jack being at the top of coaching. If you're ever at an event with Jack, he's always in the front row and he's taking more notes than anybody else. And I love that, is he's still learning. So I guess that's the teaching point for everybody, is the smartest founders out there, they're students first. They're not the experts. They want to learn from everybody.
I love it. That's amazing. Danny, thank you so much for joining us today. Where can we learn more about you? Where can we start to get your incredible skills, knowledge transfer, et cetera?
Well, as a thank you to bearing with my stories, and I'll see if I can figure out how to fit in vasectomies with this one, Anthony. Wanted to give everybody a free guide to help you create your well-crafted story. So if you go to freestoryguide.com, again, freestoryguide.com, we show you, Jimmy and I take you through what is our 5C process, which is for any speech. Before you write the speech, first of all, you have to have clarity. And then the 4 components of the speech you need is you need to be able to connect with your audience. You need to teach content. You need to have a clear call to action. And most importantly, you need a close that connects with the audience in an emotional way. You can get that at freestoryguide.com. And again, I think you guys are great. If you have, I was once working, this is when I was a journalist. I once worked for a magazine. I should have learned this. I should have learned the lesson long back then. It was called Technology Transfer Business Magazine, and they only had 6 subscribers. All of them were Saudi Arabian oil sheiks worth billions of dollars. I'm like, well, those are the 6 that you want. And so they had a great advertising budget. But it doesn't matter how many people are listening to the pod. Plus, you know what, on a more emotional thing, there's probably an entrepreneur out there that's struggling, and just being able to listen to you guys share your stories, it gives them a little bit of encouragement. And to me, that's worth everything, when you can be that person that encourages a person.
Danny, if you want to hear about nothing you're screwing up right now is worse than Anthony and I've screwed up.
The whole point is you're not alone.
Yeah. And, you know, I put out a LinkedIn post before Christmas being like, hey, I don't care, because somebody said, I just made this terrible marketing screw up. I go, I've made worse. And so I challenged anybody to come up with a worse marketing screw up than I have. Still waiting for somebody to beat me. Really terrific conversation. Thank you again, Anthony. I learned that it doesn't really matter how many people, so long as they're oil sheiks.
As long as they're oil sheiks.
I appreciate the oil sheiks that are listening to this podcast right now. Thank you, oil sheiks, for listening. And monetization, we don't even have to worry, because they're sheiks. They're
sheiks. Yeah.
Money at some point. Anthony, what do we have coming up?
First of all, Danny, thank you again for coming on. Always a pleasure to have you on the podcast. So for tomorrow morning, we're talking to Mike Hancock about making good leadership decisions. Really looking forward to that. As a reminder, everybody, for Chris's heart, please, thank you for listening, and please go leave us a review on Apple Podcast.
Only if you like us. If you don't,
if you don't,
at howtofounder.com.
Yeah, complain to me on LinkedIn if you don't like it. Otherwise, let us know how you feel about us on Apple Podcasts. We're trying to increase our reviews there. Gosh, that's it. We will see you tomorrow morning, and I will end with the way I always do. May your venture grow faster than Chris's hair. Thanks, everybody. Bye.